afternoon, members.
The appointed time, members. Now we have up to 5:30 p.m. If need to end the meeting by up to 15 minutes. A reminder to members, if you have any direct or indirect pecuniary interest in the items under discussion today, please disclose the nature of such interest before you speak in accordance with Rule 83A of the Rules of Procedure. Please also note Rule 84 of the ROP, which governs voting when a direct pecuniary interest is involved. Now, I want to make a declaration. For the two public works projects under discussion today, I will declare that I am a consultant of Bank of China, Hong Kong. So the first item we will deal with is FCR 2025-26, number 25. This item invites the Finance Committee to approve the recommendation of the Public Works Subcommittee made at its meeting held on the 4th of June 2025. This is for upgrading 78RE reprovisioning of Pok Fu Lam Public Library in the Pok Fu Lam South Public Housing Developments. That's in paper PWSC 2025-26, number 6. Now, this is a project for upgrading to Category A at an estimated cost of $174.7 million in money of the day prices. Now, since the Public Works Subcommittee did not recommend any further discussion of the paper at the Finance Committee, and we have not received any joint requests from at least 3 members for discussion here. So now I put FCR 2025-26, number 25 to a vote. With those in favor, please raise their hands. Anyone against? None. I think the majority of members voted in favor of the proposal. I declare the proposal endorsed. Now, the second item, that's FCR 2025-26, number 26. Members are invited to approve the recommendation of the Public Works Subcommittee made at its meeting held on the 4th of June 2025. That's for paper PWSC number 2025-26, number 7. That's for the 1690R Hong Kong section of Hong Kong-Shenzhen Western Rail Link, Hongshou-Qianhai. The proposal is to upgrade it to Category A. It will become a paper. It will become for the Hongshou-Qianhai rail link. Now, in money of the day terms, the project is estimated to cost $303.8 million. So just like before, on the recommendation of the PWSC, the Finance Committee will not discuss the paper further. So we now come to a vote on the item. Mr. Michael Tin has claimed the division. The bell will be rung for 5 minutes.
好啦，我哋準備
Let's prepare to vote on paper FCR 2025 to 26, paper 26. And now put the paper to vote. Voting is closed. Display the results, please. 71 present, 61 for, 0 against, 2 abstention. I think most of the members in the vote supported the proposal. I declare the proposal endorsed. Item 3, FCR 2025 to 627. This item recommends to the Finance Committee the retention of the time-limited supernumerary directorate's post in the Independent Commission Against Corruption with effects from the 6th of July 2025 or with immediate effect upon approval of the Finance Committee, whichever is later, up to the 31st of March 2027, to continue supporting the Commissioner, ICAC, for discharging the role as the President of the International Association of Anti-Corruption Authorities and to serve as the Secretary General of the International Association of Anti-Corruption Authorities. That is at point D2 or equivalent. That's the proposal approved by the ESC at the meeting on the 11th of June this year. Like the previous items, according to the recommendation from the ESC, the Finance Committee will not have further discussion on the paper. I will now put paper FCR 2025 to 627 to vote. For those in favor of the proposal, please raise their hands. Thank you. Any opposition? Dr. Teck Chi Yuen. I think that most of the members in the vote supported the proposal. I declare the proposal passed. The fourth item today, FCR 2025 to 628. Members are recommended to endorse the proposal endorsed by the ESC at the meeting on the 11th of June 2025 concerning paper EC 2025 to 6, number 7. That is, A, retention of 3 time-limited supernumerary posts in the Education Bureau. That is 2 Assistant Director of Education as D2 grade and 1 Principal Education Officer as D1 grade, with effects from the 10th of September 2025 with immediate effect upon approval of the FC, whichever is later, up to the 9th of September 2030. And B, the conversion of 1 Assistant Director of Education, D2 equivalent non-civil service position, to permanent civil service post, D2 equivalent non-civil service position with immediate effect upon approval of the FC. To lead the implementation of various measures so as to develop Hong Kong better into an international education hub and contribute to the country's strategic goal of being an education powerhouse. Like the previous items, according to the recommendation made by the ESC, we will not have further discussion on the paper. I will now put paper FCR 2025 to 628 to a vote. For those in favor, please raise their hands. Thank you. Any opposition? Again, Dr. Teck Chi Yuen. I think most of the members in the vote supported the proposal. I declare the proposal passed. The fifth item today, FCR 2025 to 629. Members are invited to endorse the recommendation made by the ESC at the meeting on the 11th of June this year on paper EC 2025 to 6, number 8. That is the retention of 2 directorate grade supernumerary positions in the railways branch of the EMSD. That is 1 Chief Electrical and Mechanical Engineer as D1 grade and 1 Chief Electronics Engineer as D1 grade for 5 years with effect from the 16th of July this year or upon approval by the FC, whichever is later, for leading the team to cope with the continuous expansion of the railway network and ensure the continued provision of safe, reliable and high-level railway services. Again, like the previous items which have been dealt with, according to the recommendation by the ESC, we will not have further discussion of the paper. I will now put paper FCR 2025 to 629 to a vote. For those in favor of the proposal set out in the paper, please raise their hands. Thank you. Any objections? Again, Dr. Teck Chi Yuen. I think most of the members in the vote supported the proposal. I declare the proposal passed. Now the final item today, FCR 2025 to 630. Members are invited to approve the proposals. A. To merge two of the grants under the Traffic Accident Victims Assistance Scheme, that is injury grants and interim maintenance grants, into a new grant called Compassionate Grants and the proposed relevant payment schedule. And B. To adjust the compassionate grants annually based on the change in the Consumer Price Index or CPIA in the past year, and to delegate the authority for approving such adjustments to the Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury. The LWB has consulted the panel on welfare at the meeting on the 9th of June. One supplementary information paper has been submitted. To answer members' questions, we have from the LWB, Mr. Ho Kai Ming, Under Secretary for Labour and Welfare, and Ms. Nancy Kwan, Deputy Director, Mr. Tony Yip, PAS for Labour and Welfare, and Ms. Anissa Ma, Assistant Director of Social Welfare. I will now invite Reverend Peter Kuhn to report the salient points of the discussion of the panel to members. Chairman, at the meeting on the 9th of June, the panel on welfare discussed the enhancement proposal for enhancing the Traffic Accident Victims Assistance Scheme. Members generally support the proposal and raise many suggestions, including designating a specified healthcare organization assessment mechanism to accurately assess the injury of the applicant, shortening the period of assistance and expedite prosecution on fraud, and also excluding accidents involving illegal behaviors from the scope of the assistance, and also including accidents caused by drones into the scope. Also, an information sharing system should be established between the government and insurers to prevent repeated claims. Now, some members pointed out that the assistance level upon the adjustments cannot provide sufficient help to needy families. The administration was urged to seriously assess the impact of the proposed mechanism on self-hire drivers, food delivery workers, and other similar groups, so as to strike a balance between cost saving and policy efficiency. Now, upon the request of the panel, the government has submitted supplementary information to set out the data of various assistance under the scheme in year 2023 and 4 to justify the adjustments, and also set out measures to prevent fraud like abuse of medical certificates. Thank you. The floor is now open. There are 9 members who have pressed the button. They are Dr. Teck Chi Yuen, Mr. Benson Look, Robert Lee, Lam Chun Sing, Frankie Yik, Professor Chan Wing Kwong, Ms. Lam So Wai, Mr. Michael Tian, and Ms. Doreen Kong. First, Dr. Teck Chi Yuen. Thank you, Chairman. Now, the discussion topic today is slashing the number of the grant items. There are more requirements. The assistance level is reduced, and also the duration is shorter. Now, I'm worried about the impact on the grassroots workers. So what's the genuine policy intent behind the change? The last time on the panel on welfare, the administration said that with a lower amount of assistance, there would be less incentive for fraud. Now, I beg to differ. To arrest fraud, there are other measures. I doubt the effect of prevention on fraud by lowering the assistance level. So can the government explain the logic behind this? Can you justify your claim with past data or surveys? Second, most of the applicants are grassroots workers. Now, the CSSA may be of help, but there are some people who are the so-called fringe citizens who are not eligible for CSSA. So with the reduced amount of assistance, will it be sufficient to tide them over the crisis? Under Secretary, I will defer to my colleagues from the Social Welfare Department about the details of the grants. Now, the fund targets not just the grassroots workers, but the general public. So it is not means tested, and contribution to the scheme is not needed. So in case anyone is involved in an accident, whether they are the cause of the accident or not, they will receive a sum of money to tide them over. And there are other grant items for grassroots workers. So again, the fund does not entirely target only grassroots workers. Now, there are many accidents which are eligible for claims from insurers. So we don't think the impact on grassroots workers would be huge. We would like to accurately reflect the genuine policy intent while efficiently using public money. Ms. Nancy Kwan, Deputy Director of Social Welfare. Thank you, Chairman. Like other people facing financial difficulties, the SWD does provide them with assistance, for example, referring them to CSSA schemes and other charitable trusts. Now, together with other trusts, we maintain a very close communication. For those with genuine financial needs who requires immediate help, we will refer them to the funds, including Li Po Chun Charitable Trust Fund, Tan Shiu Keen and Ho Tin Charitable Fund, Brewin Trust Fund, and Kwun Fong Trust Fund for the needy. Thank you. No follow-up questions. Next, Dr. Tick. Can the government explain the relationship between cutting the fund, cutting the assistance, and prevention of fraud? Mr. Ho, there were indeed some fraud cases because of the huge financial incentives. Now, applicants can get the assistance as long as there is a traffic accident and as long as they are approved. So there are people with ulterior motive who may abuse the fund because of the huge financial incentives. Now, for grassroots workers, between 2019 and 2024, in the 5 financial years, there were some 2,809 cases with assistance refunded, involving an amount of $125 million. So it shows that this is a comprehensive program for helping citizens, and the money will be refunded if the claim is successful. Mr. Benson-Look. Chairman, we are merging the 2 grants under the TAVAS to the Compassionate Grant. The purpose is to more efficiently utilize our public money while providing financial help to tie over the victims of traffic accidents, so I support it. It will also be efficient in combating fraud. Now, paragraph 13, there was a large-scale operation with some 300 offenders arrested involving some $14 million. I've mentioned in the panel's meeting that there are several types of fraud. There are some totally cooked up cases, and there were some cases which were committed by syndicates. So my concern is on combating fraud. Now, this week, there was a conviction case where the court sentenced the offenders to 8 to 12 weeks imprisonment, and they need to refund to repay the entire amount to the tune of $110,000. So the $14 million mentioned in the paper, were they recovered or not? Now, according to the administration main reply to the oral question from a colleague, that the government would step up random checking of medical certificates on a risk-based approach. Now, in 2023 to 4, there were some 10,000 applications. How many cases were subject to random checks, and how many suspicious cases were found? What's the amount? Last question, there is a reporting mechanism on fraud about the assistance fund under the SWD. So how many reports were received through this channel? How many cases were convicted? 3 questions. Mr. Ho. I think Mr. Benson look refers to the case involving a real traffic accident but fake medical certificates. It was discovered during our routine inspection. Now, in the first half of the year, SWD has confirmed some 1,600 cases with the hospital authority and the insurers, accounting to 24% of the total number of cases. If necessary, we will increase the number. I will defer to the SWD for supplements. Ms. Nancy Kwan. Thank you. Concerning the case involving a large number of defendants, we have proactively reached out to the relevant applicants and conducted interviews with them. Now, so far, we have successfully recovered some $600,000 in excess assistance. Now, what about the reporting form? Ms. Ma, Ms. Anissa Ma. Thank you. We are encouraging the public to report suspicious cases, and also in our daily work, we have stepped up inspection of the applications. We vet the documents very stringently. So over the past 5 years, we have received more than 100 reported cases. Besides reports, upon discovery of suspicious cases, we would refer them to the police. So last year, about the case with 300 defendants, the police is still investigating the case and taking the case to court. So concerning the recovery of fraud money, the entire amount is not recovered yet because the investigation process is still ongoing. We are working closely with the police to do that.
Mr. Lee Chen-keung. Can we switch on Mr. Michael Lee's microphone, please? Thank you, Chairman. From media reports, we have learned that people call this TAFA scheme, Traffic Accident Victim Assistance Scheme, they call it cash for crashing, where criminals get money from the government by fraudulent means. That's not what we want to see. We want to help people in need. That's why we support the government's proposal. Now we're bringing back the requirement of 7 days of sick leave. This is only right because doctors don't just hand out doctor's note frivolously. Now, there's also a restriction about people being able to apply once every 2 years. So the first question I want to ask is, what's the biggest amount scammers have got from the government under TAFA, and what's the means of transport involved in those accidents? Mr. Nesama. So we looked at cases of repeated applications from the past. We looked at the past 3 years, 2020, 1 to 22 to 2023 to 24. So we looked at applicants who applied more than once. In total, there were 5,000 such cases. That made up 19% of all cases over the past 3 years. So there were repeat applications. That's not to say those people are shady people. Some traffic accidents did happen, but we have to return to the original intention of the scheme. This scheme is non-means tested, and it's also a no-fault scheme. We want victims of traffic accidents to have quick access to relief so that we tide those people over the immediate financial challenges. So as we review the scheme, we want to limit applications to once every 2 years to meet the goals we just stated. Mr. Lee asked which modes of transport were involved in those repeated applications. I don't have such figures at hand. Can you give us the information after the meeting? Now, some people claimed assistance by citing an accident because of the e-scooters. And that's just ridiculous. So will the government revisit the definition of transport? Now, you said there were 5,000 repeated applications. What's the largest number of applications? Was it over 10 applications from the same person? So, Ms. Anisoma, do you have the figures? So I don't have. So all that we have is figures on people who applied more than once in 2 years. Now on e-scooters. Now we follow the Traffic Accident Victims Assistance Scheme Ordinance in what we do. For every application we receive, we talk to the police to make sure a traffic accident has happened within the meaning of that ordinance, so the police can verify that an accident has happened before we proceed. So Mr. Lee asked for figures. Among the 5,000 cases, what's the largest number of applications from the single applicant? That's the first question. And the second question, what were the modes of transport involved in those 5,000 cases? Next, Mr. Lam Chen-sing. The government is reviewing TAFA. Maybe it's because of the fiscal deficit or it's because of the abuse and fraud in the past. I get it. I know the government is trying to focus its resources on those most in need. What I do not wish to see is to tar everyone with the same brush. You scale back the scheme massively just because you came across a couple of cases. There are self-employed drivers, there are delivery workers, those people also get into traffic accidents, and now we are massively scaling back the assistance for them. That's something I don't want to see. Professional drivers with employers have sickness days, they get compensation. But many people are self-employed drivers or self-employed delivery workers. Now there's a thematic survey going on, and one area for improvement is better protection in terms of work injuries. The Labor and Welfare Bureau is looking into this policy area, but here we're scaling back the Traffic Accident Victims Assistance Scheme. So what we do here is at odds with what the LWB is doing in terms of the research. Now we're bringing back some requirements, so 7 days of sick leave instead of 3 days, and that can prevent frivolous cases. Sure, you can go even higher with a threshold, 10 days or 14 days of sick leave or hospitalization. I have no problem with that when we can help people in need. But can we keep the interim maintenance grant for people in need? I know the government is dealing with a fiscal deficit. Now we are already scaling back the number of days from 100 days to 60 days. can we limit restrictions to once per year? Even if 2,000 extra people apply for the fund, that will only cost you $36 million. Will that be really unaffordable? Have we considered alternative adjustments to TAFA so that we can have a higher threshold, we guard against abuse, but we can also make sure greater protection for people in need? Mr. Undersecretary. I agree with Mr. Lam Chun-sing. Our protection should focus on preventing people from getting hurt. That's why there is labor insurance. Other places also have insurance coverage for self-employed workers. But those insurance policies require contribution from the workers. Insurance without contribution usually comes with a moral hazard. You don't contribute anything, you can get money out of it, and that will be moral hazard. This principle applies to all labor insurance across the globe. The Labor Department and the Census and Statistics Department did a thematic survey. Self-employed workers want such labor insurance. We will take into account that suggestion, and we will bear that in mind in our future legislative exercise. But this scheme here, the TAFA scheme, is not an insurance scheme. It involves no contribution. We offer immediate relief for people. We decided against a threshold. We do not want a traffic accident victim to have to provide income proof before they can access relief. We also have to guard against abuse and fraud. That's why we adjusted the threshold. For self-employed drivers, we will adopt other measures. Say through legislation, we offer compensation for injuries. For this fund here, there is no income proof required. We want to provide quick access. And then there are those 4 charitable funds that can offer support for victims. So that's how we can ensure swift relief for people who got hurt. Undersecretary, you said this would save you $270 million plus $50 million. At the end of the day, you just want to balance the books. Can we relax one of these restrictions? Can we allow 1 application per year, or can we keep the interim maintenance grant? If we keep one of them, will we fail to balance the books? Undersecretary. The fund comes from levies on all motorists. We don't want to make holders of driver's licenses to pay more in levies so that people can get more money out of the scheme. So after discussion, we decided to keep the levies unchanged. So that's our decision. Chairman, one last comment. In that case, I do not support this proposal. I support stronger efforts to guard against abuse, but then there are people with real needs, and this is a huge blow to those people. That's what I want to say. Mr. Frankie Yik. This scheme is well intended, but people abused the scheme. Otherwise, people wouldn't call this scheme cash for crashing. People see this as an incentive instead of assistance. Now, if other members want to find out more about the scheme, I'm happy to give you many examples of how people scammed the government. I support the government's proposal to change the scheme. As I said at the panel, if you get the maximum amount, you get $165,200 over 6 months. That's $22,700. That's better than working, because you can get the assistance while you work as a gig worker. There were people also staged traffic accidents. A number of people applied for the scheme and then they got arrested by the police. Now we also saw a syndicate of scammers forging documents to access the assistance. I know the point about the scheme is to give quick relief to people in need. We are being generous, but that invited abuse. That's why we need to tighten the requirements. Now, one requirement left unchanged is that you let people apply for assistance 6 months after the accident. People don't start out trying to scam the government. Others persuade them to exploit the scheme. It shouldn't take a traffic accident victim 6 months to apply for the scheme. 60 days is good enough. Now, the most helpful change is to bring back the requirement of 7 days sick leave. Clinics are comfortable with granting 3 days sick leave, but 7 days, that's harder. Now, Professor Chairman Kwong can comment on this in a moment. For fraudulent cases, we are calling for a body to be set up or designated by the government to assess someone's injuries. Otherwise, those people go to the A&E for a doctor's note, and that's something we would like the government to consider. 2 questions for the Undersecretary. Now, we allow people to apply for assistance 6 months after the accident because there are cases when the victim has to go into intensive care. So we have to allow that victim several months' time to apply for the assistance. That's why we allow 6 months, and we find that appropriate. We cannot tell how long someone will stay in the intensive care unit, so for now we will stick to the 6-month window. We will allow victims to apply for the assistance 6 months after the accident. Now, on a centralized mechanism for assessing injuries, I believe Mr. Frankie Yik has work-related injuries in mind. For work-related injuries, you have to assess the extent to which the victim has lost the capacity to earn money. But for TAFA, all that we want to know is whether this person got hurt. We just need a doctor. For work-related injuries, you have to make a decision over whether the victim lost 5 or 10% of their earning capacity. So we still have to explore whether we really need a centralized mechanism for assessing injuries.
Lady.
I think the Undersecretary has misunderstood my question. I don't have any views on your assessment mechanism. Now, let's say I hurt my waist and I can get a medical certificate easily from doctors. I can even pay for it. So as long as that is a registered medical practitioner, the certificate would be recognized. So there are some injuries which cannot be confirmed fairly. So I'm just saying we need a mechanism to confirm the injury is genuine. So I think Mr. Frankie Yik's concern is not about the severity or gravity of the injury. Ms. Ma? Now, the most important thing is the claim is supported by a sick leave certificate. So whether those are certificates issued by private doctors or public hospital doctors, they will be accepted. Now, Mr. Frankie Yik suggested designating a central pool of doctors for issuing the certificates. Well, I think we need to strike a balance here because we respect the professional independence of doctors, so we will just recognize the medical certificates. Professor Chan, thank you. I agree with Mr. Frankie Yik. Now, if the injury is lasts only a short period of time, then any certificate should do. But if the injury is so severe that the sick leave lasts for half a year, then maybe we need a designated pool of doctors to certify those claims. Now, I've also worked as an assessor in terms of work injury with the Labor Department for some 8 years. So there are principles to follow. There should be some requirements, for example, requiring the medical certificates to be issued by doctors in the public sector. Now, there are some patients who see different doctors and get a large number of sick leave days. So I think to safeguard public money, there should be a recognized pool of doctors who are responsible for certifying long sick leave days. Now, I have my own question as well. Can I have some time for my questions? Now, I support reviewing and enhancing the assistance scheme. According to paragraph 8, the level of the compassionate grant is set with reference to the income received from the levies and the government's contribution under the scheme. Now, the policy intent is to provide a timely relief for victims in traffic accidents. So why isn't the compassionate grant calculated based on the changes in CPIA index? That would be more helpful for helping the victims and ensure wise use of public money. And also, there is a restriction of only one claim within 2 years. What if a driver is so unfortunate that they suffered multiple accidents within 2 years? They won't be able to claim a compensation for their second injury. Now, for past fraud cases, would the administration consider imposing a steeper penalty on fraud cases, for example, putting the applicants on a blacklist and prohibit them from making another claim in 10 years' time? Mr. Ho? Chairman, on whether consultation with a public sector doctor is needed. Now, whichever case it is, there are 93% of cases which have consulted a public sector doctor on top of a private doctor. But there are still 40 claims. So since 93% of the cases are already patients in the public sector, we don't think that requirement is necessary. Now, if someone has such poor luck to suffer an injury multiple times in 2 years' time, well, that shouldn't be the case because measures should have been put in place to avoid injury. So we think a limit on claims is needed. Now, if there are very unfortunate cases, the 4 charitable trusts managed by the SWD would come into play. Now, whether the adjustments to the compassionate grant should be packed with the CSSA, I will defer to Ms. Ma. Thank you. On the compassionate grant, victims from traffic accidents need help. So we would like to provide a modest but timely relief to them. On whether reference would be made to the level of CSSA payment, we have made a comparison. According to the standard rates under the CSSA, the level of the compassionate grant is higher than the CSSA. What about steeper penalty? Now, the spirit of the assistance scheme is to offer relief to victims of traffic accidents. So we are not seeking to punish them. But if there are criminal elements, we will refer them to the police. Just a quick follow-up, Chairman. Now, like the Undersecretary said, any doctors should do. But there are some patients who suffer from long-term pain in terms of months, and they would feel painful all the time. So we need to have a pool of doctor to ensure that public money is well spent. Ms. Connie Lam, thank you. Now the TAVA has been a non-means tested and a no-fault finding scheme. However, the amount of expenditure has increased by $200 million. I believe that this enhancement will reduce the incentive for drivers to apply for the assistance. They will become more prudent and the number of accidents would be reduced, and it will also avoid abuse. So I support the proposal, but I have some worries. There are some high-risk jobs, for example, professional drivers, who may be impacted by the proposal more. So will the government consider providing some discretion to professional drivers as long as certain special conditions are fulfilled? For example, if there are different traffic accidents, they should be allowed to file more than one claim in 2 years' time. In terms of occupational therapy and rehabilitation, now maybe we should draw on the success of the pilot scheme on rehabilitation for workers suffering from work injury. Subsidies should be given to them to receive rehabilitation services in the private sector so that they can return to their position sooner. Thank you. Mr. Ho. Chairman, I thank Ms. Connie Lam for her views. If there are indeed more than one accident within 2 years, now the first time is eligible for a claim. For the second time and beyond, the SWD can refer the patients to the 4 charitable trusts and other funds as well. Now that brings me to the second question. Would it be beneficial to refer the patients to the private sector for rehabilitation? Now, according to the reports, there has been a survey conducted recently on the pilot rehabilitation program for employees injured at work. Now, the referral service is not very popular among the patients. But despite a case manager being assigned to help the patients, most employees injured at work would choose public sector services rather than receive rehabilitation services from the private sector. So the pilot scheme targets mostly construction workers because usually their sick leave period will be longer. Later on, the scheme was extended to professional drivers. And the onboarding rate was not as high as we expected. So we are still conducting the review for room of adjustment. Now, if most patients rather see a doctor under the HA rather than seeing a private doctor, even with the subsidies given by the government, we will find out the reasons why. Now, what's the eligibility for applying for the 4 other trust funds under the SWD? Isn't the eligibility threshold higher? Now, about the low usage rates of the CUHK's private rehabilitation service, now there are complaints that the patients would be discharged by the public sector institutions quickly. So that's where the private sector can come into play. They can provide longer rehabilitation services for injured workers and help them return to job quicker. Yes, we do want injured workers to return to their position as soon as possible. But the reality is they do not prefer they do not prefer private healthcare. Now may I defer to Ms. Nancy Kwan for supplement. Thank you. Now the charitable trusts I've mentioned, they are for alleviating the urgent needs of patients. So usually the eligibility threshold is low. Of course, different charitable trusts come with different scopes, and some are compatible with users in healthcare. Now, the requirements under the funds are different from the compassionate grant, so a case-by-case referral is needed. Mr. Michael Tan. Now, at the meeting of the panel on welfare services in June, I already complained about the low prosecution rate under the scheme. In 4 years' time, there were only 700 fraud cases. 300 were caught, and only 6 defendants were charged. I asked the administration what can be improved. Now, the administration only said that removing the incentive would help. So it seems that besides lowering the financial incentive, there are no other ways to avoid abuse. Now, in the paper, it says that the SWD would ask for confirmation from the HA, the insurers, and also other departments. Now, it seems that you have responded to my suggestion, but the wording you use is that the SWD will continue to step up work on catching abuse. Now, to be truly innovative, we should avoid wordings like continue to enhance. And why now? You should have done that a long time ago. Now, to be a true reformist, you should do something more aggressive. So I don't see any new measures to plug the gap. You are just leaning in to what you have been doing. So according to your logic, to lower the prosecution rate, you just don't catch them. Just conduct fewer random checks. But that defeats the purpose. So if you are still referring the suspected cases to the police, why are you confident that you can lower the rates?
Undersecretary, on increasing the prosecution rate, that is not our key performance indicator. The TAFRA scheme has a very low threshold. It's not means tested, no contribution needed. You just need a traffic accident and the victim needs a doctor's note proving the injury. That's good enough. The victim can get the assistance. And it would be hard to require that the police prosecute the people. The case may involve a staged accident. The police may not be able to catch them. With a forged instrument, that's caught under the law. We said we wanted to reduce the incentive because scammers have to run a risk in trying to defraud the government. Once we reduce the return, then it will not make much sense to take that risk for the smaller return. And we will continue to do the spot checks for things like forged doctor's note. That way, we can make sure that the applicants are people in need instead of scammers with forged doctor's notes. We really should have a conversation about this matter, so the Undersecretary cannot tell me what the KPI is. So, is it better to have more suspected cases, or is it better to have fewer such cases? Now, once you become suspicious, you refer the matter to the police, and the police have to do all the work. But the police may end up realizing that they cannot prosecute the people they have arrested. So there is some sort of linkage between your scheme and the prosecution rate. We're not going after the people in need just because we want higher prosecution rates. So the Social Welfare Department refers cases to the police. How many of those cases turned out to be fraudulent? That's the point. If that's the case, the prosecution rate should be higher. So I have no idea what the KPI is. So what should the KPI be according to the Undersecretary? I don't think this scheme has prosecution rate as its KPI. Undersecretary, are there KPIs for the scheme? Now, we have a projection of how many applicants there will be, but we don't have any goal about the prosecutions. I'm not after the prosecution rate. I'm asking, what does the government wish to achieve with this scheme? Undersecretary, we want to give timely relief to victims of traffic accidents. Mr. Ho, the Undersecretary, has answered this question 3 times. This scheme is not about combating fraud. There should be a separate channel for combating fraud. And as Mr. Michael Tin knows, he just raised a policy question, so we will stop here. Mr. Rincon. Now, I support merging the 2 grants under the Traffic Accident Victims Assistance Scheme, and I also support the other adjustments. We're not after key performance indicators. We're not trying to make money from the scheme. What we want to do is to help people in need. We want to guard against abuse. We want to guard against fraudulent applications. Establishing fraud is never easy. The Social Welfare Department has to step up their measures to guard against fraud. I know the SWD has all along done their work. Still, we have to say that over the recent years we have seen a rise in the number of fraud cases and the amount of money involved. So that's why we are concerned about abuse and fraud, and I hope the SWD can see why. So can the Undersecretary tell us, maybe can the Undersecretary reassure us that we want to spend the money where it matters and we know the government wants to save money. So can the Undersecretary tell us whether there are ways to put people's minds at ease, meaning what can we do to reduce instances of fraud? Mr. Frankie Yik just made a point about how long people have to apply for assistance after an accident. In other places, they also offer similar forms of assistance, but they require victims to file an application within 28 days, and in some places, reporting the matter to the police is required because those places make it clear that you cannot submit fraudulent applications. And when people in an accident settle the matter amongst themselves, they have to support extra supporting information to qualify for assistance. So my question is, what new measures do we have to combat abuse? I know this question has been asked many times, but this matter is close to my heart. So this is the second time such questions are put to the Undersecretary. So people have to report the matter to the police before they can access the assistance. So to qualify for assistance, you need confirmation from the police about the traffic accident. Even then, there has been a surge in the amount paid in recent years, and that points to criminal syndicates involved, and people may have staged minor accidents for the assistance. And this goes back to Ms. Kong's first question. Can we shorten the window in which people can apply for the assistance. Now, when a serious traffic accident happens and you only give people 28 days time, the victim may still be in the ICU, and it wouldn't be right to do that. But we can consider considering that in our future review. So let's try our new arrangement. We should give more time to victims to file an application, and that's fair to those victims. Chairman, I don't think every case ends up in the ICU. We can have a special arrangement for victims who are so badly injured to be in the ICU. And we should also use big data to guard against fraud. And I hope the government can consider this. So, Undersecretary, you can look at how many cases, how many applicants ended up in the ICU, and then you can tell whether your proposal is the right way to go. 3 members are still waiting to speak. Other members, if you wish to speak, please press the request to speak button. Now we have 4 members lining up. Mr. Michael Look. Today we're talking about a review of the Traffic Accident Victims Assistance Scheme. And we're trying to scale back the assistance from $918 to $330 because we're merging the injury grant and the interim maintenance grant. We will have the compassionate grant in place of those 2 grants. I am aware of the abuse in recent years, and we have paid greater amounts in assistance. We're making only $400 million every year, but we're paying people $500 million there per year, and that points to a deficit. And that also means we have to solve the problem. But does that warrant scaling back the scheme to such an extent? Traffic accident victims need help. Does what happened justify scaling back the scheme to such an extent? We are scaling back the amount by 2/3, and we're also scaling back the time limit by 2/3. So in effect, we are cutting back the assistance by 80% in terms of the amount. The paper is silent on guarding against abuse. And for those charitable funds that will take the place of the TAFA scheme, to what extent will those funds help? I am aware of quite a number of cases of abuse, but how bad is the abuse? We don't have the specific figures on that. We only went through a brief consultation, and we're scaling back the assistance by such a huge extent. And the trade union for the transport sector cannot support the scheme. The FTU will vote against the scheme. Now, we are running a deficit of $100 million per year. Now, you can scale back the amount by only 1/3, and that can take pressure off your finances. Trade unions are saying this. You can be more rigorous in gatekeeping instead of scaling back the amount by such a huge extent. Abusers will still go after your scheme because they can get money out of the scheme. Now, of course, the government may have enough support for the proposal today, and we can scale back the scheme. But if we see a surplus in a few years' time, can we increase the assistance at that point to make sure we give relief to people? This is supposed to be a scheme serving people's needs. Now, several other FTU members are meeting with the chief executive at the moment. They cannot be here. Ms. Jovi Chen is now at the United Nations to speak up for justice. So I'm the only one from the FTU here who can vote against the scheme. So, Mr. Secretary, if you run a surplus of the scheme in 2 or 3 years' time, can you review the scheme again? This scheme has been in place for many years. We can review it. We're not increasing the number of days of sick leave, we're bringing back a requirement. This scheme started off with the requirement of 7 days of sick leave. We then shortened that to 3 days, but now we have reviewed the situation, so we decided to bring back the requirement of 7 days of sick leave. Mr. Michael Law called the scheme a social insurance, but I have to say this again. This scheme requires no contribution. There is no threshold. We should be reduced for insurance. We should be encouraging people not to claim on the insurance. For a motor insurance, if you have an accident, you have to pay more in premium if you get a payout this year. With the assistance scheme in place, people may get the false impression that the more accidents they get, the more money they get. You can think of the scheme as timely relief. What you should not do is to treat the scheme as a form of social insurance. Chairman, this is a form of insurance because people pay their licensing fees and there is a levy on that. The money goes to the scheme. If you have a surplus, please increase the assistance. Don't be so stingy. The Undersecretary said there will be a review. Mr. Lai Tong-kwok, I have just one question. And that's the restoration of the requirement of 7 days of sick leave. For an applicant to access the assistance, they will need to talk to a registered doctor who proves that this person, meaning the applicant, requires hospitalization or sick leave of no fewer than 7 days. If hospitalization is needed, why are we requiring 7 days instead of 3 days? Hospitalization and sick leave are two different concepts. Have we considered the alternative where we require only 3 days of hospitalization but 7 days of sick leave? It's still possible for someone to sustain serious injuries and then only stay in hospital for 3 days. We're short of beds in public hospitals. And for someone who stays 7 days in a private hospital, that person will be rich. They won't need the assistance. So I wonder what the government's thinking is. Undersecretary. Ms. Anisama.
Chairman, as mentioned by my colleague before, when the scheme was launched in 1979, a requirement was set that is minimum 7 days sick leave or hospitalization. We didn't make a distinction between the two because cases differ. If it is proven that the injury is caused by a traffic accident, it doesn't matter whether it is hospitalization or just sick leave. So we would like to revert back to the original intent and use 7 days sick leave as a requirement. Chairman, if I may, that contradicts the first line in paragraph 10. Now, if you read it more closely, it says requires hospitalization for no less than 7 days or sick leave for at least 7 days. Either one will do. Now, what Ms. Ma said just now was that it's not the case. Did you just improvise? Ms. Ma, do you need to clarify your position? Thank you, Mr. Lai. Now, as mentioned in the paper, we need a doctor's certificate to prove that the injuries arise from traffic accidents. For hospitalization, no less than 7 days. Now, for those cases not requiring hospitalization, we look at the number of sick leave days. Now, Mr. Ho, many members have proposed some enhancement measures, including the one proposed by Mr. Lai Tong Kwok. These are all well-intended suggestions, so please consider their views. Since there is going to be a regular review mechanism, so maybe these views can be of use in the next round of review. Mr. Chen Kin-po, thank you. Now, the insurance sector and also Mr. Frankie Yik from the transportation sector. We have met with the police for more than a dozen times, asking the police to crack down on fraud involving traffic accident claim. Now, whether it is genuine injury or not, drivers would make the claim. That's why it is called the Driver's Award. Everyone wants to have a dip in the scheme. Now, last year there was a case involving 300 defendants. It shows the scale of fraud and abuse. Now, last year in December, I submitted a written question to the government, and the government said that there would be an immediate review. Now, half a year on, an enhancement proposal is submitted to the FC. Now, the situation is just preposterous. I support the government making a move to plug the gap. Now, this is contagious. More and more people would join in. It would be a black hole in the government's budget. So I agree with other members' views. We need to enhance the scheme. For those who really need it, we need to give them more. But we really need to plug the gap for scammers. We need to arrest the defendants. We shouldn't give them a dime, so I will support this proposal. Thank you. Only 2 more members left, so I will invite members in the complex to return to the room to join the vote. Mr. Chen Pui-Leung, thank you. Now, there are 3 parts. There are 3 sources for the fund. First is the levies on vehicle and driving license fees, and then contribution from the government, and also refund of assessment payments. So how much assistance has been recovered or refunded to the government? And what particular measures have the government put in place to ensure that if the claimants have made successful claims from insurers, then the assistance would be returned to the government? Now, for example, 3 years on after the grant is given, a letter should be sent to the claimants to confirm that no other claims have been awarded. Now, that's the 3 years, the claim period under most insurance policies. 2 questions. Thank you. Concerning Mr. Chen Pui-Leung's question on the amount of money refunded, I made a mistake. Over the past 5 years, on an average, each year there are some 1,600 to 2,089 cases each year. So I made a mistake just now. Now, concerning the refunding amount, in year 2023 to 4, $125 million was refunded. The previous one, $141 million, and for the previous 3 years, $100 million for each year. So there are around 2,000 cases of refund each year. So each year that would translate into $300 to $400 million. Now, last year, $125 million was refunded out of $300 or $400 million spent. So the proportion is quite high. The other question about measures on encouraging claimants to make a refund. I would defer the question to Ms. Anissa Ma. Chairman, the important thing is the assistance is in the hands of those who really qualifies it, and we will find anyone who do not deserve the assistance and have them refund the amount. So first of all, we would confirm with the police whether that is a genuine traffic accident. And second, for each medical certificate received, we would check them one by one. And about abuse and also excess grants. Now, because of our diligent work, we have uncovered suspected fake medical certificates and fraud cases. Now, I think the question is, since $125 million are recovered each year, would there be a mechanism to encourage swifter refund from claimants? On that, in terms of refunding, some claimants have filed claims with insurers. So we have stepped up communication with the insurers. When an assistance is granted, we will immediately send a letter to the relevant insurers to notify them of such. Now, what about the 3 years period mentioned by Mr. Chen? Now, I think you need to confirm with the claimants whether there are other claims awarded to them in 3 years' time. That will serve as a deterrent. Ms. Ma? An applicant has to make a declaration on the application document. Now, if fraudulent claims are uncovered, we will refer the case to the police. Now, for each medical certificate, we will keep the gate vigorously. Any other question? If not, then after Dr. So Jianwing has spoken, we will put it to vote. Dr. So. Thank you, Chairman. Now, I have a question concerning something that the Deputy Director had said. Now, it was only last year that fake medical certificates were uncovered. That's why you are putting back the 7-day sick leave requirement in place. But I think the situation has existed in society for many years. So I'm surprised that you have only uncovered these cases just last year. So why are you only now enhancing the mechanism if the problem has existed for many years? Now, first of all, I support extending the sick leave day requirements from 3 to 7 days, and also the other measures. The financial incentive is simply huge. If the system is too simple, then there will be a lot of fraudulent claims. And I agree with other members. The entire assistance amount has reduced by some 80%. So the paper says the SWD will help needy claimants to file a claim under other charitable trust. But that goes against the purpose of this scheme, that is a modest but timely relief. So how do you balance the two? Mr. Ho? Chairman, I thank Dr. So for his support. Now, 300 defendants in a case, that was a syndicate offense. Now, in the past, there were some individuals who fake an accident and get a fraudulent medical certificate. But last year, that case involved both. So that's a case of forgery as well. Now we will keep monitoring the situation and work with the police on how to deal with the case last year. That was a real traffic accident. But even with a collision with the rear view mirror, that is also an accident. Now the big case last year was proof that there was systematic abuse of the system, and that is unacceptable. If there are no other questions, I will now put the paper FCR 2025 to 630 to a vote. Would those in favor of the proposal please raise their hands? Those against, please raise their hands. Mr. Michael Look, as you have said, colleagues from the FTU are against the proposal. Another one, Dr. Dick Ji-Yun, sorry I missed your hand. Now I think most of the members in the vote supported the proposal. I declare the proposal passed. And the next meeting of the Finance Committee will be held on the 4th of July. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.